For those of you who are finalizing your academic text according to APA, I wanted to show you how you can go through and format your text to make sure that you have the correct spacing, the indentations, and so on. So the first thing I would do here, if you have your text single spaced, you want to select the whole text, and I would go into line spacing under spacing. Make sure that this is set at 0. This is set at double. And you select the box that's labeled "Don't add space between paragraphs of the same style." All right, so there we have our double space. Now the next thing we want to do is add a 1/2 inch indentation. So the first thing here we'll probably want to do is double check our units of measure. So I'm going to go into File, Options, and Advanced. And if you scroll down, you're going to want to select, or make sure that it's already selected, inches. If it's set as centimeters, then we want to change this to inches, and then OK. And then we want to go to View, Ruler. And as you have selected the text, always make sure you've selected the text, then select this top slider bar and move it over a 1/2 inch. It's much easier to use inches since it's a little bit more difficult to find this by using centimeters. All right, another way you can do this, if you're already in the formatting, the line spacing, you can also select first line 1/2 inch. So it's basically the same thing. I'm used to using the sliders, but you can also select the indentation by selecting the first line and then 0.5. Now, since we're talking about indentation, we can also look at your references and make sure that you have what's called a French indentation or a hanging indentation. Again, 2 ways to do it. I like to use the slider bars, so I'll select the bottom over, I'll move the bottom one over a 1/2 inch and then make sure that the top slider is all the way to the left. Now, just so you know, if you want to use the line spacing options, again, the text is selected. This is the trick whenever you're making any kind of changes here in this box, that you want to make sure that you've already selected the text, because this is what's being affected. So here we can select hanging indent, and it's basically the same thing. You'll notice the slider bars now have moved over position. So either way. So your references should be like this. Notice it's on a separate page. I did a page break. I'll go ahead and remove this. You can just add here, put your cursor right before the word references and select Control Enter, or insert page break. And then again, make sure that the references is centered to the page. Now I'm going to select here, I'm going to double check the spacing. The spacing is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to go back to line spacing options. Now this time I'm going to select single spaced. I'm going to make sure that there's no extra spacing before or after the paragraphs. And I'm going to again select don't add space between paragraphs and hit OK. Now you'll notice this brings everything together, which is fine. Then we're going to force a double space by just hitting the enter key after the heading. So we have references, then we have our first reference. I'm going to hit enter again, and now you'll notice we have single space within each reference, double space between each reference. And that's basically it. The margins should be okay by default, but if for some reason you notice that the margins, you don't have a 1 inch all the way around your page, you can easily go in here and just make sure that you have selected the normal margins. But again, by default, you shouldn't have to change this. But the extra space between paragraphs that we did here, we'll go back to line spacing options. This, by default, under spacing, Microsoft Word automatically adds 8 points of spacing after each paragraph. So you're going to have to go in and manually change this each time that you're creating a document. and you're writing a text according to APA where there's no additional space in between paragraphs. Now, in this case, there's only one paragraph, of course, but it's good to know because if you later are writing an essay, a multiple paragraph essay, this is going to be something you want to do. And for references, this is also what we want to do, because even though these are not paragraphs, they treat it as paragraphs. So we, again, want to remove extra space by going in and selecting or removing this extra space after the paragraph. Again, something by default that Microsoft Word already has configured. All right, so that's basically it. I wanted to share with you here the steps involved in creating a double-spaced, half-an-inch indentation, changing the units, and creating a French indentation for your references. And we'll talk separately about checking your references depending on the type of reference and APA for the purposes of your text.